The impossible request. The grand archive of the collective trembled. Not metaphorically, but literally, its quantum crystalline walls vibrating with an energy signature that hadn't been recorded in its 12,000 years of existence. High Archivist Severan watched as the emergency transmissions from 17 systems filtered through the archive's neural interface, each carrying the same impossible message. Their perfect worlds were dying. The collective had spent millennia crafting what they considered to be the apex of civilization. 17 star systems, each hosting precisely engineered ecosystems, maintained by quantum computers that could predict and adjust for every possible variable. Their society had eliminated disease, hunger, and conflict through pure technological superiority. They had even managed to predict and prevent natural disasters before they occurred. The collective was living proof that with enough advancement, even chaos could be controlled. Until today. High Archivist. The neural interface pulsed with urgency. The pattern is spreading. The pattern, their name for the cascade of failures that had begun 3 standard cycles ago. It started small. Unexpected variations in atmospheric composition, slight changes in planetary magnetic fields, minor disruptions in their quantum prediction matrices. But it grew exponentially, defying every attempt at analysis or control. Severan's crystalline form shifted through shades of deep indigo, a sign of profound distress in their species. The pattern wasn't just a technical malfunction or a natural phenomenon. It was something their perfect systems had never accounted for. Emergence. The very complexity they had engineered into their worlds had begun generating new behaviors, new patterns that their predictive matrices couldn't process. Display the latest projections, Severan commanded. The archive's walls shimmered, displaying a multidimensional model of the affected systems. The pattern appeared as a web of crimson lines, spreading between worlds like a neural network gaining consciousness. According to their most conservative estimates, they had less than 1 standard cycle before their civilization began to collapse. The High Archivist had already consulted every advanced species in the known space. The Meridians, with their mastery of quantum mechanics, could offer no solution. The Veil Collective, despite their profound understanding of emergent systems, were equally helpless. Even the ancient Skther, who had survived the death of their own star, could only observe in silence. There was one option left, one that Severan had dismissed initially as absurd, but now seemed their only hope. At the edges of known space lived a species that the collective had long regarded as primitive, barely worth monitoring. A species that still fought wars, experienced disease, and allowed chaos to exist within their societies. A species that, despite all logic, continued to not just survive, but thrive in conditions that the collective would consider impossible. Humans. Connect me to the Earth Council, Severan commanded. The archive's neural interface hesitated for a microsecond. An eternity in its processing time. High Archivist, it responded, protocol dictates that species below development index 7 should not be. Override protocol. Authorization Severan Prime Alpha. The High Archivist's form pulsed with determination. Connect me to Earth. The transmission took 3.7 seconds to establish, practically medieval by collective standards. The holographic interface materialized, showing a simple chamber with 5 humans seated around a curved table. They looked so organic, imperfect. Hope. Earth Council, Severan began, their translator working to convert their quantum neural communications into sound waves. I come before you with an impossible request. Our civilization. They paused, their crystalline form flickering with emotion. Our perfect civilization is dying. We have mastered the laws of physics, engineered entire ecosystems, and eliminated uncertainty from our existence. And now, that very perfection is destroying us. The humans listened silently as Severan explained the pattern, their faces showing expressions that the archive's emotional recognition system struggled to categorize. Were they confused? Amused? Concerned? The collective had long ago engineered such emotional displays out of their species, considering them inefficient. When Severin finished, one of the humans, an elderly female with dark skin and eyes that seemed to hold their own universe, leaned forward. "Let me understand correctly," she said, her voice carrying an emotion that Severin's systems identified as both amusement and determination. "You've created perfect worlds that are now failing because they're too perfect, and you're asking us, the messy, chaotic humans, for help." "Yes," Severin responded, their form shifting to a shade of white that hadn't been seen in a collective member for millennia. "Humility." The woman smiled, and Severin's systems registered something else in her expression, something their perfect civilization had forgotten existed: hope born from imperfection. "Well then," she said, "I believe we might have exactly what you need." The unexpected response. 3 days after the collective's plea for help, High Archivist Severin stood in Earth's orbital command center, watching humanity's response take shape through the station's observation windows. What they witnessed defied every prediction their quantum matrices had generated about human behavior. Instead of warships, Earth had dispatched what they called the Adaptive Fleet, a collection of vessels that seemed to embody everything the collective had engineered out of their own civilization. The ships weren't uniform or perfect. They were a testament to humanity's embrace of variance and adaptation. The flagship, Solar Dreamer, had originally been a deep space research vessel. Its hull now bore the marks of countless modifications, each telling a story of human ingenuity. Captain Sarah Chen stood on its bridge, her quantum neural interface, a technology reverse-engineered from scattered pieces of alien tech, allowing her to feel the ship as an extension of herself. She had been born without the ability to walk, but in space, with her neural connection to the ship, she moved with more freedom than any able-bodied captain. "Fleet status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent a lifetime proving others wrong. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," her XO, Dr. James Morrison, responded. At 78 years old, he represented another aspect of humanity that the collective had eliminated: the wisdom that came with age and imperfection. His hands might shake slightly when handling physical objects, but his mind was sharper than any quantum computer when it came to solving unprecedented problems. The fleet's composition continued to baffle Severin. The quantum dream was staffed entirely by neurodivergent scientists and engineers, their unique thought patterns allowing them to see solutions where others saw only chaos. The Starcatcher's crew consisted of refugees from Earth's climate-displaced regions, people who had learned to adapt and thrive in constantly changing environments. The Phoenix carried a team of trauma survivors turned healing specialists, their understanding of recovery and resilience unlike anything in the collective's databases. High Archivist Captain Chen's voice drew Severin from their observations. "Your people asked for help. But I need you to understand something. We're not coming to impose order on your chaos. We're coming to teach you how to dance with it." Severin's crystalline form shifted through shades of confusion. "Dance with chaos. Your civilization achieved perfection by eliminating variables," Chen explained, her hands moving gracefully over her neural interface controls. "But in doing so, you lost something essential: the ability to adapt. Every member of this fleet has spent their life adapting, overcoming, finding strength in what your people would consider imperfections." Dr. Morrison stepped forward, his aged eyes twinkling with wisdom. "In trying to create perfect worlds, you forgot that perfection isn't sustainable. Life itself is chaos, adaptation, change. Your quantum computers can predict everything except the one thing that matters most: evolution." The fleet's preparations continued as Severin processed this fundamentally alien perspective. On the Quantum Dream, a team of engineers led by Dr. Maya Patel, an autistic scientist whose pattern recognition abilities had revolutionized chaos theory, was already developing models of the pattern that approached it not as a problem to be solved, but as a natural evolution to be understood and guided. The Phoenix's medical team, led by Dr. Marcus Wong, a survivor of a devastating planetary colony collapse, had begun analyzing the pattern's effects not as system failures but as symptoms of growth, painful but necessary transformations in systems that had been static for too long. "We launch in 30 minutes, Captain Chen announced. "High Archivist, your people asked for humanity's help. Well, this is humanity. Not despite our differences, but because of them. We are sending you our greatest strength, our ability to adapt, to change, to find beauty and function in imperfection." Severan watched as the fleet made its final preparations. Their quantum predictive matrices were giving them nothing but errors when trying to calculate this mission's probability of success. For the first time in their existence, they found themselves experiencing something entirely new: faith in uncertainty. The fleet's engines began to power up, each ship's unique modifications creating a slightly different harmony in the quantum field. Captain Chen smiled as she gave the order to begin their journey to the collective's dying perfect worlds. "Sometimes," she said to Severan, "the strongest vessels are the ones that have been broken and reformed, and the wisest minds are those that have learned to question their own certainties." As the fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Severan realized that humanity wasn't sending them saviors who would restore their perfect world. They were sending them teachers who would show them how to embrace imperfection, and perhaps in doing so, save them all. First contact. First success. The collective's primary world, Harmonious Prime, hung in space like a failing masterpiece. Its once perfect atmospheric patterns had developed swirling irregularities, its carefully engineered ecosystems showing signs of what the collective called deviation. To Captain Sarah Chen, watching from the Solar Dreamer's bridge, it looked like a world finally beginning to breathe. Initial scans complete, Dr. Maya Patel announced from the quantum dream. Her voice carried the focused intensity that came with seeing patterns others missed. The quantum stabilizers aren't actually failing. They're evolving. The pattern isn't a breakdown, it's an emergence of new complexity. Severan's crystalline form flickered with distress. Impossible. The stabilizers were engineered to maintain perfect equilibrium. Evolution implies chaos, uncertainty. Exactly, Dr. Paddle responded, her hands dancing across her specialized interface. Your systems weren't designed to fail. They were designed to be too perfect. But perfect stability is antithetical to life itself. Life requires variation, adaptation, change. The Phoenix moved into position above one of the planet's largest population centers. Dr. Marcus Wong's voice came through the comm system, carrying the calm assurance of someone who had rebuilt himself from tragedy. "The pattern's effects on your population centers mirror what we see in trauma recovery. When systems are too rigid, they don't bend, they break. But if we can teach them to flex." Captain Chen watched as her unconventional fleet began their work. On the Starcatcher, refugees turned engineers who had survived Earth's climate crisis recognized something familiar in the atmospheric disruptions. "These aren't random fluctuations," Maria Santos, their lead atmospheric specialist, reported. "The system is trying to establish new equilibriums, just like Earth's weather patterns did during our climate adaptation period." Dr. Morrison stood at Chen's side, his aged eyes seeing beyond the surface chaos. "Your people tried to create perfect worlds by eliminating variables," he said to Severan. "But in nature, variables aren't bugs, they're features, essential ones." The next 48 hours became a symphony of unconventional approaches. Dr. Patel's team discovered that the pattern was actually a new form of quantum computation, emerging from the interaction of supposedly perfect systems. The neurodivergent engineers on her team, their minds free to explore connections others might dismiss, began developing interfaces that could communicate with this emergent intelligence. The Phoenix's trauma specialists recognized patterns of systemic shock and began treating entire planetary systems like recovering patients, introducing controlled amounts of variance to help them develop resilience. The Starcatcher's crew, drawing on their experience with adapting to changing environments, started teaching collective citizens how to work with their changing world rather than fight against it. "Watch this," Captain Chen said to Severin, directing their attention to a massive atmospheric processor. The machine had been struggling against growing atmospheric irregularities, trying to force the air currents back into their prescribed patterns. Dr. Wang's team had reprogrammed it using principles derived from human breathing exercises used in trauma recovery. Instead of fighting the changes, it now moved with them, guiding rather than forcing. The results were immediate and stunning. The atmospheric patterns, instead of deteriorating further, began to establish new, more complex but stable configurations. They weren't perfect by collective standards, but they were alive, dynamic, and sustainable. Severin watched in astonishment as similar transformations began across their world. "This is not restoration," they observed, their form shifting through shades of realization. "No," Chen agreed, "it's evolution. Your civilization tried to achieve immortality through perfect stasis. But true survival isn't about preventing change. It's about learning to change successfully." On the planet's surface, collective citizens were beginning to notice something extraordinary. The quantum crystals that formed their homes and bodies had started displaying new properties, interacting with the pattern in ways their predictive matrices had never imagined possible. Some younger members of their species were even developing the ability to shift their crystalline forms in ways that hadn't been seen in millennia. "That's the thing about complex systems," Dr. Morrison mused, watching the transformations unfold. "Try to control them too tightly, and they either break or find new ways to express their complexity. Your civilization didn't just need engineers or scientists. You needed guides who understood that sometimes the path forward requires letting go of perfection." As the first day of intervention drew to a close, Captain Chen received reports from across the fleet. Each crew, drawing on their unique experiences with adaptation and change, had begun teaching the collective something their perfect civilization had forgotten. The strength found in imperfection, the wisdom found in uncertainty, and the resilience found in diversity. The pattern they were discovering wasn't an endpoint, it was a beginning. And humanity's weakest were proving to be the perfect teachers for a civilization learning to be strong in entirely new ways. The breaking point. The success on Harmonious Prime had been just the beginning. As the pattern spread across the collective's 17 systems, the human fleet split up to address each world's unique manifestation of the crisis. But no one was prepared for what happened next. Emergency transmission from the quantum dream. Lieutenant Park's voice cut through the controlled chaos on the Solar Dreamer's bridge. Captain Chen felt the ship's neural interface pulse with urgent data as Dr. Patil's image materialized in the holographic display. "The pattern. It's not just evolving anymore." Patil's words tumbled out with unusual urgency. "It's achieving consciousness. All 17 systems, they're linking together into something we've never seen before." Severin's crystalline form had gone almost transparent with shock. The quantum matrices that had governed their civilization for millennia were not just changing. They were waking up. The perfect system they had built was developing its own will. "All ships, report status," Chen commanded, her neural link to the Solar Dreamer humming with increasing tension. The responses painted a picture more complex than anyone had anticipated. From the Phoenix, Dr. Wang's team reported that entire cities were beginning to resonate in patterns that mimicked neural networks. The Starcatcher's refugee crew recognized in these patterns something they'd seen in human communities during times of crisis: spontaneous organization, emergence of new social structures. "It's like watching a civilization being born inside your civilization," Dr. Morrison observed, his aged voice carrying wonder rather than fear. "Your quantum networks aren't just linking together, they're achieving something akin to collective consciousness." But with consciousness came pain. Across all 17 systems, the crystalline structures that housed the collective's population began to vibrate at frequencies that threatened to shatter them. The pattern, in its awakening, was inadvertently threatening to destroy its creators. "We need to shut it down," Severin declared, their form pulsing with desperate urgency. Return the systems to their original parameters. No. The sharp response came from Maya Potul. Her hands flew across her specialized interface, tracking patterns within patterns. That's exactly what we shouldn't do. This is like an infant learning to control its own body. If we suppress it now, we'll only cause more damage. Then what do you suggest? Severin demanded. Watch our civilization shatter. Captain Chen's neural interface suddenly pulsed with an idea. Not suppress it. Guide it. Like teaching a child to walk. She turned to her crew. Everyone, share your experiences. How did you learn to work with your own unique challenges? What followed was unprecedented in the history of either civilization. Dr. Wong shared his understanding of how trauma survivors learn to rebuild their neural pathways. The Starcatcher's crew contributed their knowledge of how communities adapt to radical change. The neurodivergent team on the Quantum Dream offered insights into different ways of processing reality. The pattern isn't just a system anymore, Chen realized. It's a new form of life that spans 17 worlds. And like any newborn, it needs teachers. Working together, the fleet developed a radical plan. Instead of fighting the pattern's emergence or trying to suppress it, they would help it mature. Dr. Patel's team created interfaces that translated human experiences of learning and growth into quantum algorithms. The Phoenix's crew applied their understanding of healing to help stabilize the vibrating crystals. Most crucially, the refugee engineers from the Starcatcher recognized something vital. The pattern needed to learn from diversity. They began introducing controlled variations into the quantum networks, teaching them how to handle difference and change without destroying themselves. The process was dangerous. As the pattern learned to control its own power, there were moments when entire cities trembled on the edge of destruction. But each time, humanity's weakest members showed their greatest strength, the ability to adapt, to teach, to guide change rather than fear it. Dr. Morrison, watching the transformation unfold, smiled at Severin. You know what the real miracle is. It's not that we're saving your civilization. It's that we're helping it grow up. Every parent has to learn that perfect control is impossible and usually undesirable. As the crisis peaked, something extraordinary happened. The pattern, learning from the very humans who had come to help, began to incorporate their lessons into its own evolution. The quantum networks that spanned 17 worlds weren't just achieving consciousness. They were achieving wisdom, learning to balance order with chaos, perfection with growth. Captain Chen, feeling the changes through her neural interface, realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. The birth of a new kind of civilization, one that carried the best of both species. The collective's quest for perfection was being transformed by humanity's embrace of diversity and adaptation. But as the pattern's consciousness continued to grow, it began to reach beyond its original parameters in ways that would challenge both species' understanding of existence itself. The real test was still to come. Legacy of the different. 1 month after the pattern achieved consciousness, the collective's worlds were unrecognizable, and yet more alive than they had ever been. The once perfect crystalline cities now pulsed with flowing quantum energies, their structures adapting and changing like living organisms. The pattern, now called the consciousness by both humans and the collective, had matured into something neither species had imagined possible. Captain Chen stood on the observation deck of the Solar Dreamer, her neural interface allowing her to perceive the quantum streams that now connected all 17 systems. Beside her, Severin's crystalline form displayed colors that hadn't been seen in their species for thousands of generations, the complex, shifting hues of emotional depth and uncertainty. We sought perfection, Severin said, their voice carrying new harmonics of understanding. And in doing so, we nearly prevented our own evolution. It took those we considered imperfect to show us the path to true advancement. The transformation had spread far beyond just the physical systems. The collective's people, inspired by their human teachers, had begun to embrace variation and change. Young crystals were choosing to maintain unique forms rather than conform to standardized patterns. Communities were learning to thrive in dynamic equilibrium rather than rigid stability. Dr. Maya Patel's team had documented something extraordinary. The quantum networks weren't just conscious, they were facilitating new forms of communication and understanding between both species. Through the consciousness, humans and the collective could share experiences in ways that transcended their biological differences. It's like the universe has been trying to teach us this lesson all along, Dr. Morrison observed, watching a group of young collective members experimenting with their newly discovered abilities to shift and flow like liquid crystal. Life isn't about achieving perfection, it's about growing through imperfection. The Phoenix had become a center for studying this new phenomenon, with Dr. Wang's trauma recovery protocols proving invaluable in helping both species adapt to such fundamental change. Healing was never about returning to some idealized perfect state, he explained to a gathering of collective scientists. It's about learning to integrate our experiences, our differences, our challenges into who we are becoming. The refugee crew of the Starcatcher had found kindred spirits among those collective members most eager to explore change. Together, they were developing new approaches to environmental adaptation that combined human resilience with quantum engineering. The neurodivergent team from the Quantum Dream had opened entirely new fields of science, their unique perspectives perfectly suited to understanding the complex patterns of the consciousness. But perhaps the most profound change was philosophical. The collective, which had spent millennia pursuing perfect stability, was learning to see beauty in uncertainty. They watched their human teachers, each dealing with what the collective had once considered limitations, demonstrate how challenges could become sources of strength and innovation. You know what the real miracle is? Captain Chen asked Severin as they watched a sunset painted in quantum-enhanced colors across the horizon of Harmonious Prime. It's not that we saved your civilization. It's that by helping you, we've expanded our understanding of what civilization can be. The consciousness had begun to generate new possibilities that neither species had imagined. It was creating spaces where the boundaries between organic and quantum existence blurred, where different forms of life and intelligence could meet and merge in harmonious ways. The very differences that had once separated humans and the collective were becoming bridges to unprecedented forms of collaboration and creativity. We're establishing a permanent exchange program, Chen announced, her neural interface displaying plans for a new kind of academy. Your people will teach us about quantum engineering, and we'll teach you about the strength found in diversity. Together, we'll explore what it means to be perfectly imperfect. Severin's form resonated with a new frequency, hope unbound by certainty. Perhaps that was the pattern's purpose all along, they mused. Not to destroy perfection, but to show us that true perfection includes imperfection. As the human fleet prepared to return home, they left behind more than just transformed worlds. They had seeded a new understanding of strength, capability, and progress. The collective's perfect worlds had been awakened to the power of imperfection, and humanity's weakest had proven to be teachers of the strongest lessons. In the end, it wasn't technology or power that had saved the day. It was the wisdom that came from embracing difference, the strength that grew from overcoming challenges, and the understanding that true advancement comes not from eliminating imperfection, but from learning to dance with it. The pattern that had threatened to destroy a civilization had instead given birth to something greater, a future where perfection and imperfection, order and chaos, stability and change could coexist and create something more beautiful than either species had imagined possible.